We're doing. Uniforms, let's get a little weight up there.
Are y'all ready? I'm nervous to do this. Ready? Woo! Call to order. All right. Girl, 3 years of law school, and I was ready to do that, okay? So we're going to start with what is scheduled for a second and final read next week at the November meeting. That's section 2. So is there any of these policies in section 2 that a board member would like to discuss?
I do have one comment, Ms. Schaefer. The first one, 3.205, I submitted to you all an incorrect copy. It has none of the revisions that were on your first read. So I'm just asking that y'all ignore that. What I will do is submit the correct copy as first read in November, and we'll be able to catch it in the December Policy Committee meeting.
So 3.205.
Yeah.
Yes, it is nothing like what you should be seeing, so that is my error.
The very first one?
Yes.
Okay.
Not seeing. Do I select?
Is that the one that included the large bonus for your salary?
Mr. Connor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just real quick, not fighting anything, just wanting to kind of bring up to the general public 3.202, Emergency Preparedness Plan, otherwise known as the Fire Drill Plan. Yeah, I know a lot of people have been asking questions from the different sessions about the things that came out of it for the safety of the schools, and I will continue to say that anything thinking about safety in schools is a good thing. Obviously, there's never enough you can do to keep our students safe. This plan came out of specific situations that happened at the Covenant school, and this does a lot to keep our kids safe. Making sure that when I was at the Summer Law Institute for TSBA, a gentleman spoke who his life work is to keep schools safe, and he lost his best friend's son in that because they left because it was a fire drill. The firearm set off the smoke detector and set off the fire alarm. And being good kids and being the line leader, he was the first kid out of the room. So again, anything we can do to keep kids safe. I know that this seems like something so trivial, but it is one more step to keeping our kids safe. So I just wanted that to be said, that plans like this that are minutia and hard work are necessary work.
With no other lights, I'll bring up some of the ones that I have talked about. You have a light, Miss? All right, go ahead, Jill.
I just want to get some clarity on the zero tolerance offenses, this 6.309. On the second page, the change in language here about having the threat assessment team at the school deem it valid or invalid, does that kind of does that address the issue of, or the discrepancy between the schools making one decision and the sheriff's department making another?
So the language that you're looking at reflects a change in state law.
Okay.
And so it amends the zero tolerance, that it doesn't automatically turn into a zero tolerance just because there is a threat. It uses the language of valid threat.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is strictly applying that law to our policy.
Okay. Do we have a plan of how to address those discrepancies?
Yeah, Mr. Connor and I, if you remember, I don't know if it was last month or the month before, there was a resolution that was on the board that Mr.
Right.
Connor pulled.
Yeah.
And we've, met with Senator Watson, who's agreed to facilitate us meeting with the writers about that legislation again to hopefully clarify the language on the criminal code side, but this is strictly the code around zero tolerance.
So this is advocacy work we need to be doing at the state level and not something that we can fix here.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've got several policies on here that deal with transportation, and I don't have any opposition at all to what we see here, but I just wanted to say this publicly because I know we've got some transportation issues, and we're getting ready to have to bid for a new contract on that. Tough work that Brandon Allen and that team out there does. And I mean, it's our biggest liability exposure that we have is transporting kids every day. And I just want to say for the record, what a great job that Brandon Allen and that entire team out there does. And the stuff that they're faced with every day, and the fact that I think we're still 100% staffed. I mean, it's just amazing to me, the work that they do. So I just wanted to say that publicly. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Speaking of that, 3.4 student transportation management, I had asked a question. There's a new public chapter 548 that we learned about at the TSBA that went into law in July, and it requires these certificates for every bus driver, and that those be posted on every bus. And so I had questioned earlier whether we needed to add that language of chapter 554 into this policy of 3.4.
Sure. So we worked alongside Scott and Mary actually to make sure on this one. We include it in the transportation manual, so I think it's included on page 10 of that manual. The policy requires that we create the manual, and so since it's included in there, it kind of helps us streamline that a little bit.
I just wanted the board to know that we are following that new law.
This is the last year on that contract too, isn't it?
You're talking about the employee driver and the contract driver. It's not the last year on first student. So Mr. Groen has already been in conversations with Brandon Allen, Robert, his team about, bringing that. So remember, we've got legacy employee drivers, we have contracted drivers, and then we have first student. And so the two contracts that are gonna need to be looked at this spring are the legacy employee drivers and the contract drivers.
Not first student.
Not
There's
first student.
Another year with that.
Yes.
Mr. Smith, your light's still on.
I'm sorry.
No other lights, but I will continue with some of the questions that I had. 3.201 on safety. It requires a three-step process. Well, I asked if we should define the department for clarity in the policy, and there was a recommendation that we don't define that, who that is. 3.2, it's line 22. School administration shall work in consultation with the district safety and security department. When I was reading it, I questioned, well, who is that? So I asked, and if Ms. Shannon wants to respond.
Yeah, so our recommendation here was that we wouldn't define who that was. We actually went through cleaning up policies where there were multiple places where we had named a person by title, and that title is no longer the same, right, or there, with shifts to the org chart. And so the recommendation here would be that it says the Department of Safety and Security, that we don't change it to something like the Director of Safety, just in case that changes. It helps us not have to clean up the policy so much.
Is there any discussion about that?
You're okay with that? You're okay with that change?
I was okay with that explanation. So the next one I pulled was 3.206, community use of schools facilities. And in here, that's the three-part process of lines 24 and 31. So they mention any use of a school building or athletic facility, you have to do a facilities use form, and it has to be approved by the principal, the Office of Risk Management, and a community superintendent prior to the use of the facilities. I questioned, is that third step necessary? Or is the principal and the Office of Risk Management efficient?
Did we talk about this the last time?
Yeah, it was just, that's why my light's on.
Mr. Connor.
Yeah,
Go ahead. I think that Chris and I were on the same page. I think we talked about this.
we did, and like, the main point is almost like a records keeping to make sure that we know, like, who is using the facilities. I can't think of any of these that have been denied by the community superintendent, but it's so that by learning community, we have them and know who's in the facilities.
I think I think the analogy used was similar to field trips, was that all parties now know about it. There's not one person that can unilaterally do it. Everybody knows. And it wasn't a situation of like triple protection. It was more like everybody knows.
Right, same thing.
Then on line 26, it states the school system will charge any group for using the facilities, and there is some exceptions to that on 27 and 28. And we had a discussion, I'll let Shannon discuss this more, of trying to encourage our youth organizations in our communities to use our football fields, our gyms, and creating community. So letting the little leaguers play on our fields and in our gyms and on our, so that they grow up in those schools, on those fields. They feel loyalty to those fields and those schools, and we might retain our athletes. So in trying to build that community, my thought is, should we change the language to may charge, giving some discretion, or should we work a different process? And I'll let Shannon talk about, they thought this through, of maybe having a procedure of thinking this through more, of allowing our youth associations to use our facilities. Mr. Connor. You want Shannon? Okay.
Sure, just for context here, so we looked into the May question a little bit. I think that does open up a bit of discrimination that we could be called on of just like having it a little too open. And so then we looked at, could we put in like youth organizations specifically, but there are completely differing types of youth organizations. And so I actually had a doctor, do you want to come up? Conversation with Dr. Sharp and Tim James a little bit around this and what they're thinking. Our proposal, and I'll let him talk about this a little bit more, but our proposal to you would be, this policy comes up again in June, so we would have to work it by May. And we'd actually just like to work this policy a little bit greater to do something like a facilities fee schedule that gives the option for people to apply and have reduced or lower fees if they were needing that as part of their organization.
That's it essentially. We have a group that's meeting periodically, including operations, risk management, and finance to gauge what that fee structure would look like. We're definitely open and want some flexibility. For example, if you have a community youth organization that, you know, it's a bunch of volunteer coaches and a volunteer organizer, and it's, you know, in Harrison or somewhere like that, Gary, you know, we want to encourage those organizations to use our facilities. Now, saying that, use of our facilities, it's costly. You know, we have to pay the light bill when we turn lights on ball fields. We have to have custodial services to clean up restrooms and gyms, and it's not uncommon on the weekend. I'll get a call for they'll need a plumber to come out to a facility because of a toilet's overflowing or something. So, you know, it does require management on our end when these community organizations are in our buildings. But for those community groups, we would want a fee that would be certainly doable for them. But at the same time, there are other groups that use our facilities that are youth organizations that are money-making organizations.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, like an AAU tournament. There are people who make a lot of money in that environment, and we feel there should be a fee assigned that would be, you know, appropriate for that type of usage.
Mr. Connor.
I hear that and would agree with it completely, that if somebody else is making money on our facilities, we should take in.
That's right.
It's kind of funny to talk about this today. I just had a constituent bring up to me that there's new and different signage at Red Bank Elementary for utilizing their playground. I know that as I drop my children off at Norwell Park, that there's a sign that says this facility is available for community use. It specifically says the city of Chattanooga, which was something that I was going to get clarity on anyway, but it says that it's available, and obviously for security reasons, it's not available during school days until aftercare has completed. So typically that's for most of our schools from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. But at that location, there was new locking things after hours, and I know that we've done that at other schools too. What is our exact stance? Is it defined in this policy of how we allow the utilization of our playgrounds, or?
That's in policy
That's
somewhere.
right. Yeah, it starts on line 9. We need to look into the Red Bank Elementary. Is what you're
Okay.
saying.
Well, yes, I feel like I feel like it's okay to say I don't think I'm taking safety out of this. There's new locks there. I was told about. I've not seen them personally. I've asked for the constituents to send me pictures, or I might get a chance to get by there later this week. There's also at Norwell Park, they call it the Butterfly Gate. It's the gate to lower school in the back. It typically is locked during the school day, but it's been starting to be locked even on the weekends too. So it's more difficult for someone, especially someone with special needs, to get all the way around the school and down the ramp. So I'm interested to see the policy, or just what we do to make sure that those are available to the general public outside of school hours.
Yeah, that's policy set. I mean, on line 9 it says that outdoor playgrounds, outdoor basketball courts are available when they're not in school use. Like if you've got a outdoor club that's using them at 4 o'clock, then they wouldn't be. But that's supposed to be happening. If it's not, we just need to know those
Okay.
individual places and look into
I didn't know if we'd changed something to in a safety method to make sure that gates of a certain size must be locked, just like doors to every yada yada. Okay, there's not something special. Good. Well, then I will look for that answer in the future and reach back out to the person that asked me.
Well, we can look into Red Bank Elementary specifically, make sure we get it corrected.
Ms. Jones?
So, I'm torn about the whole use of facilities after hours. I just am. Because in some of the schools that I represent, our constituents are not so nice to our properties. And they do things that are not so nice on our properties. And then our kids could possibly be exposed to those not so nice things that they leave behind. That is a concern for me. And so I know in the past, I've had constituents call me and they're upset because they can't walk the track at a certain school or they can't do certain things. And I do understand they should be allowed to do that. It is, taxpayer dollars. I understand all of that. But sometimes people are not always good stewards of what we allow them to do on our properties. And so I am concerned about that and what that looks like also. And I remember saying this across the days when Brainerd got their new track. Like, I was like, lock it up, because I didn't want nobody riding their strollers down it, going on there with high heels. I mean, the children, the students at Brainerd High School waited so long for a new track, and I just knew it was going to be torn up in a matter of years, because you're not supposed to do all those things on the tracks. And so I think while we do allow these spaces to be utilized by the community, and we want that to be a communal space, I think it is very important that we do post and continue to emphasize what is allowed and what is not allowed on those properties. And it's no different than your neighbor, the older neighbor who don't want you walking across his grass he done worked on all summer. Like, just don't do it, because ultimately your tax dollar is gonna have to redo the track and you mess it up, and then you ain't gonna wanna pay for it. So I do wanna say that. And then I always have concerns about organizations utilizing school facilities and making for profit, unless to me, I feel like if you're gonna have something at a school and you're charging people to get into a gate that was free to you, that there should be a donation back to that school. That has always just been a big concern for me, because people can make a lot of money at these little league games and these AAU games off of concessions and people coming in and all of those things. And full transparency, a lot of those kids that play those sports don't go to those schools, but they come back into those neighborhoods to play, and they go back to nice schools or more improved schools as we're working on the schools where they're playing it. I mean, it's always once again, another balance for me, because of the conditions of some of the spaces that they use. So I think it's a good idea to look at the fee scale and to kind of weigh that. I mean, if it's nonprofit, if that's different, so forth and so on. But we have to, and also in being good neighbors, we have to be good stewards of what we're given. And I could just say, for some of the schools in District 5, I've seen some of the things that our friends leave on the football fields and tracks, and I wouldn't want my child to go out and play on that and find it.
Ms. Haddon?
In my district, the Ooltewah district, I know that we have organizations, a couple who meet in our schools on the weekends, and it's become a really good thing for the community, because the community seems to get involved and come, and I think it makes them feel more a part of the school there, and they meet there, and the fee is reasonable, and anyway, I think it's really builds that sense of community. So I think it's really a good thing in my district anyway. I was curious about something for people who use some of the outdoor facilities. They didn't have access to the inside or to restrooms, so that kind of just raised an eyebrow for me. It's like, where are they going to go to the restroom, or do they have porta potties or anything like that if they're going to use the facilities? But I guess they're still willing to use the facilities there. But I was wondering also, when we do, allow people access to the inside of the building and all, and do we have faculty on staff? I'm just thinking the safety. Is there a requirement to have one person there,
That's in the board policy requires some.
Okay,
a
so
member
maybe
of
I
the
didn't read the
staff
whole
to be
thing,
there.
so I just.
And that's
Okay.
where part of that fee money goes to.
They
Yeah,
definitely.
bullet 6 on the second page, line
You
1.
know, and, you know, indoor events will require custodial services
Okay.
too, where that fee comes into play.
Okay, good. Thank you. That answers my question. But I did want to give the positive input about my district.
Mr. Slater?
Yeah, what we do at the kids club, we use the middle school gym, but in turn, since the middle school has no softball field for the girls, they have to go to the lake and use that field up at the kids park. So they kind of swap that out. Now, we use the high school new turfed field for flag football this year, and they didn't charge us anything. But the kids club donates money to the school pretty much every quarter, just in the name of the Sally Daisy Kids Club. So that works out really well for us.
Mr. Smith?
How much autonomy does a principal have with regard to, your group can come in, but your group can't? How much autonomy does that principal have?
They've got a large amount of autonomy. You know, what, we caution them to, you know, your group can, your group can't. You know, once you open up your building, it's hard to deny one group over another group. So we want them to, you know, look at these requests carefully, and does it fit your community? Does it fit a community need? Does it fit a school need? You know, is this an active group in your community? And that helps control it. And many of our facilities usage agreements are long-standing. But the principals are allowed a wide.
I'm glad to hear that, because they know.
They do.
Principals know what's going on, or what this group wants to go on. And so I just really think we need to trust our principals in large part to the decisions they make surrounding this.
Ms. Black?
I just want to restate some points that I've made before, especially in the communities that I serve, and for newcomers. There have been a few community organizations that came in and hosted different things for that specific community in the schools, and schools tend to be a safe place for newcomers where they feel comfortable. One of the only places where some newcomers feel comfortable interacting with government. I'm just going to be honest. And opening our schools in that way has done a lot to build community and build trust, and really be able to, the examples I'm thinking of, like the Guatemalan consulate coming in and helping folks get IDs, was an incredibly huge benefit to our Guatemalan population that lives here in Chattanooga. So I just wanted to say that we've had good experiences with this. We want to welcome our community into our schools. We want the entire community, whether or not they have kids in public school, to be invested in our public schools. And I think overall this is a good thing, but I do want us to be careful about like how we structure it. You know, and I tend to agree, if somebody's making money off our facilities, like kick it back. Like we have to maintain these facilities, and if you're making money, then you should be paying a fee. So.
Okay. That is the last one I had under section 2. Did anybody else have a policy that's coming up for second read next week under section 2 that they wanted to discuss? All right. So we're going to move into section 3, which is the review of policy 1.601. And I do know Mr. Groen is on Zoom. He had some comments about this. He can't push a button to light up. So I don't know. Mr. Groen, can you hear me? Do you want to discuss 1.601?
Yes, I would. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My concern on 1.601 is the idea that we will allow principals the autonomy to establish practices and procedures in their school. I think the board would agree that that is as long as it doesn't violate state law or the Department of Education policies or school district policies. As long they have this autonomy, I'll just give one example. At East Hamilton High School, the principal has been able to really artfully create a daycare center for his staff at the school. And it's all about retention of teachers and staff. Also, we saw the principal at Dalewood Middle School got community support and really transformed that middle school and made it a very unique place. So there are policies and there's practices and procedures that can be put in place. But my concern is we have a little loophole in there that in some cases means that we can have policies and practices which actually weaken our district policies. And I'm concerned that we're giving principals that much autonomy.
To be clear, you're discussing line item 9 of the current policy? Mr. Groan, is that correct?
Yes.
Dr. Robertson, do you want to respond to any of that?
Yeah, I don't honestly, like,
You know,
I think,
it currently states, it currently states within the policies and regulations of the board and the director of schools, principals are authorized to establish rules and procedures for the staff and students at their schools. The problem is what happens when they actually put in a rule and procedure which weakens district-wide policy. That's my concern.
yeah, I don't mind if the language gets changed. I mean, I think that lines 9 and 10 are saying that any procedure that is implemented has to follow board policy. If you do change, I just want to make it crystal clear to the public that there's no principal that is putting a procedure in place that is breaking board policy.
So we had discussed some language with our attorneys, so I wanted to present that to the board. So we could add this sentence at the end of paragraph that ends on line item 7. We can also add it similarly on line 10. Just says any such administrative procedure must be consistent with state law, the rules of the State Board of Education, and Hamilton County Board policies and decisions.
The only thing I would recommend, I think that if you do that, you just completely replace lines 9 and 10 with that statement, because it's kind of redundant if you put it on top of it.
That's what 9 and 10 already says.
I think what Ms. Schaefer's saying is probably a little bit more clear and explicit, but the intent is the same. I think if you put them side by side, it's a redundant statement, but,
So would you take out
I would take
9
out-
and 10 completely, take out the principals? Okay, so can we maybe bring that up for a first read in December?
Yes, we can do that.
Is there any other comment about 1.601? So then moving on to review of,
Let me,
okay, Mr. Groen?
let me make a suggestion that I had a long discussion with our attorney on this issue, and he got with TSBA and came up with this change. So if we want to have more time to make sure of the wording, I'm okay with that
Can we just
if
make
the board is.
just make a suggestion that we'll take this back, work on it with you and with either Mary or Scott, and then still plan on bringing a first read in November.
December.
Sorry.
Okay. So then we move on.
Okay.
We're going to move on, Larry, to Roman numeral 4, review of policy 1.501, visitors to the schools. And I believe Ms. Haddon had asked for this to come up because of the mother who addressed the schools, or addressed the board at our first meeting, actually. The new board's first meeting. And I don't know if anybody has any comment on it. I spoke with the administration about this policy, and it was review of this policy based on the previous speaker's concern about outside ABA's ability to practice inside the classroom with a student. If you remember, this was the mother from Appison. So I was going to let the administration speak to their recommendation here.
Yeah, I can get it started. I also have Sarah Evans here if we have any specific questions. So essentially, we don't recommend a change here to the visitor policy schools, or visitor to the schools policy. Said that backwards. We do have a current procedure document that addresses this more specifically. And so that was updated in September in light of actually conversations they've had with that parent as well. And it just explains our position. We have seen a couple districts that have adjusted policy, and there are some concerns that we need to think about in like the hindsight of that adjustment of policy. Particularly, I think it's mainly in the frustration of staff in how to be able to navigate like an external person that's not an HCS staff being in and maybe disrupting the flow of the classroom within there. That we want to consider when we think about this policy, as well as like outside providers aren't actually Hamilton County Schools employees, and so sometimes it may come up that they would handle things differently than Hamilton County Schools would require our employees to, and how you could navigate those differences. So we believe that the procedures document actually does allow for us to really be partners in places like this without having to change our policies for the visitors of school. Did you want to add anything to that as well? Okay, if we have specific questions, we're able to answer them.
Is there any questions or discussion on 1.501, visitors to the schools? Having none, we're going to move on. Review of policy 2.805, purchasing. Is there anyone who would like to make comment? Mr. Connor,
I would.
go ahead, Mr. Groen.
This policy has been changed 4 or 5 times since 2019. We've moved up to $50,000 on emergency purchases, and then it got changed to $250,000 for emergency purchases. What is the reasoning behind this raising it to $250,000?
Mr. Groen, I believe it's to be in alignment with county government. Mary might check me on this one, or I might have to go back and check the answer to that question. But I believe the last change we made was to keep it consistent with updated government practices.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
To be clear though, the 250,000 is strictly for like emergency purchases. That's not for, us going out and purchasing something that we normally would. It's strictly for emergency purchases.
Mr. Groen, anything else?
Is it possible for the board to be given on a 6-month basis a list. There's a document that the director of procurement is supposed to place emergency purchases on. Is it possible for us to get every 6 months have disseminated to us that document?
Mr. Rowan, we'll check, but I believe it comes on the next board agenda, but I'll confirm that.
Mr.
Thank
Connor?
you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a quick point. There is, so legislation was passed in the last session about purchasing for updates to schools. It was, there was an oversight in the way that it was written, and it doesn't flow well with the auditing of schools. So that will be a conversation at TSBA. The resolution passed to bring it to them. So we should be speaking to legislative body to try to get that wording corrected so that when the auditing process comes, we're not paying for something that's incorrect. We may see that in policy in the future. I'm not certain that it's on this one when they finally get it all written, but just note that our purchasing policy may have to change after that as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Groen, did you have anything else to add?
No, I agree with Mr. Connor that this is an issue that also deals with current assembly legislation that has to be looked at, and he's been a great liaison for working on those issues, and all of us could be involved with our representative on looking for that change to be made.
Anyone else on policy 2.805? Having none, we're going to move on to policy 4.301, field trips and excursions. And I asked for this to be brought up based on our last meeting about busing to voting. There was one typo we discussed, line item, page 28, line item 26. Number 1, I think there's a little typo, should be except as otherwise, so we're going to change that. But based on our discussions last board meeting, you'll see that there are special rules for athletic and band trips. That's page 28, item 24. So my thought and suggestion would be that we have the same special rules for voting and civic duty trips. And essentially, we can take the same language that's in the special rules for athletic and band trips 1 and 2 and just substitute voting and civic duty trips for athletic and band trips, and then add a number 3. And we need to work on this language still, but it would, in essence, state that any voting and civic duty trip needs to correlate with election commission rules and regulations about public transporting, and potentially having representatives from both parties on the ticket to ensure that there is no undue influence on the bus. We still need to work on that language, but this would still allow the busing to voting, but just make sure that we are protecting our students. Mr. Connor.
So to note, there is a number 3 for other things, but that's not a major deal to what you're saying. I agree. I think that we do not need to stand in the way of getting of-age students to be able to vote. The only thing I heard you say that I would push back on is I would prefer it say that there's no representatives from either party or independent or any candidate running, anyone that could be considered a part of a party, and there is only the teachers or chaperone that isn't one of us, because we kind of represent a party now and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, that there's not a representative of any party, is what I'm getting at.
I agree, we just need to figure out how to keep it neutral. Ms. Black?
I had the question because when you said that statement, I understood it differently. The only, like, I heard, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the only trips that would be approved would be when all parties are represented on a ballot. So if one of our students lives in an area where there aren't, because there isn't a full ballot because of the demographics of that area, that happens a lot. I don't want to disenfranchise anyone. I don't want to offer something to some kids that we're not offering to everybody. I don't want, yeah.
That's not my intent. My intent
Okay.
is just to keep neutrality.
Yeah, but that's my concern with putting that, like, both parties must be represented on the ticket. That's not the case for every part of Hamilton County in every election. That's not even an option. So I don't want to offer, like, I don't want that to stand in the way of a kid's learning experience.
I think we can work on our language.
Okay.
Miss Haddon.
I know I expressed my views in the last meeting, and my thinking is it appropriate at all to be busing students to the polls to vote? And my feeling is that it's about impossible to make it completely neutral to do this, and is that how we should be spending the school money? And maybe outside services independently can handle this if there's a need in the community. I just do not think it's the school's role, in my opinion, to use our, funds or school buses in this manner. And I'm just wondering if I'm the only one that thinks this way, or, if most people are thinking that we should, bus students to the polls. I'm just, I really disagree with this one issue right here.
I know Kritza spoke to this at the meeting, where the reason that this came up is because there were outside groups involved. And a lot of times when you do have outside groups involved, they have an agenda, one way or the other. And so the best way that we can provide a neutral experience is to just have our teachers load the kids on our buses and take them to the polls. And giving somebody a ride, I'm more nervous about handing this off than I am about us doing it, because I trust our teachers to be professionals.
Miss Haddon, you have a response?
Yes, I feel more comfortable with an outside agency. I know there was controversy about that. If an outside agency handles it, I don't think they should be using, our school hours, a school pickup, maybe a different place like the Bethlehem Center, a different meeting spot, but not connected with the school. But, I'm not against an outside organization handling it. I just don't think it's the school's place to do that.
Miss Jones.
So, I went to one of the first schools that did PBL. Or CSAS was one of the first schools in Chattanooga to be doing project-based learning. I have went and scratched epitaphs off of the Jewish cemetery across from the school. I walked right across the street. That was a field trip. I have gotten on a bus and been a part of the Tennessee Aquarium Parade when they first opened in the 3rd grade. That was a field trip. I could have been allergic to fish, but that was the field trip. That's where we were going. I went to field trips at the Hunter Museum because we were learning about certain things, and there may have been the exhibit. I think I'm concerned about making sure that we understand as a board the request to get on the bus to go vote was for a field trip for civics class, which, to be perfectly honest, I have been concerned for quite a while as a young adult. And I'm now 43, so probably the last 20 years about how are we really teaching civics. Because I'm not sure if people are understanding civics. And all the way back to the Bill on Capitol Hill days, I feel like we need to go back to PBS days for people to understand civics. But my concern is that it's a field trip. And so I was under the understanding that they will be writing this as a field trip for civics. if the school and or teacher decided not to make it a field trip, then they wouldn't be getting on a bus. I just am concerned about the premise for the bus, because how else do y'all think we're supposed to get them to field trips? And I think if you're going to try to find a median or a middle ground for the varying opinions of those that are having to make this policy, then I do agree with there being some language in there. I don't think, me personally, that it should say party, because my experience that led me to sit here at this day as today came from my 6th grade social studies teacher, Mr. Everett Carell at CSAS, Skip Carell, if anybody knows him, who taught us about American democracy and the process, the various levels of government. We saw all the presidents, and they are all various parties. We learned about our state level, all of that, and so it was all inclusive of everyone. He didn't just teach us this party or this party. He taught us about America and what it looks like and what government in America looks like. And that went on to Coach Dragoo and Coach Bowles and Miss Chris Monroe. I mean, everybody, Mr. Ballard, all of them were amazing Hamilton County teachers that are now in like various places in Hamilton County or retired. And they taught us about what it looked like overall, which is what I feel like our children this year saw what government looks like for everyone, right? And so I think that you can take some of the language from here, maybe not say party, but just say that they have a school staff or facility staff or whatever that is going with them. And we have to trust that our teachers and the educators that our leadership team hires and our principals hire are professional enough to do just what Mr. Carell and Coach Dragoo and Coach Bowles and everybody else has, Mr. O'Neill and everybody else that I had and everybody else up here's had, which is why we're sitting here today, because we somewhere in our educational setting had a teacher that taught us about government, not necessarily a party. And I don't think we need to talk about parties, because I said, I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna say this and I'm gonna down this hill to 2026 when I lead this board. They don't care about what letter is behind our name. When I started this process, there wasn't a letter behind my name, and when I leave it, they're not gonna care about the letter behind my name. They're caring about the fact that I'm sitting here advocating for them to have an equitable education and to learn to be good humans. So I don't want us to focus on a party, because, I mean, we about to have an ugly sweater Christmas party. Does that count? Like, it's a party. Like, it's not the main thing. So I don't want us to get stuck on that, because that's not what the children that we represent and the families that we represent truly care about. They care about public education and getting a good one.
So you're
Madam
not
Chair.
in disagreement to neutrality.
Girl, when my baby turn 18, you better let him go vote. I'm gonna come find you.
Ms. Schaefer, can I make a recommendation? Like, as we work through this, we go back and forth all night about this. What we need as administration is clarity on how to move forward with this. We ran into this with, I'll give the example of the cell phone policy a year and a half ago, that we ended up spending 327 hours or minutes discussing. I think this is a place where it would be helpful to get another board member, maybe it's the vice chair and you, to work with Shannon to put a draft that then we bring for a first review, and instead of talking back and forth about what we all believe, like, let's put something that we can actually vote on, and then that gives us clarity.
I'm good with that.
I have a question. Please, Madam Chair.
Mr. Grown?
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Robertson,
Yes, sir.
how many students were transported? Thank you. How many students did we transport to take them to vote this year?
I don't have that off the top of my head. I can, if that's important, I can try to find it, but I don't have that off the top of my head.
And then I would like you to be able to also inform the board of what the expense was to perform that for these 18-year-olds.
We can
And
find
I
that.
agree with you, Dr. Roberts, that we need to have a group come together and recommend a policy. My personal opinion is, and I agree with Mrs. Jones, that we need to be teaching strong civics. And right now, the district works on having students get involved. A lot of schools require certain community service hours, some don't. But this is something in which we have 18-year-olds who have gone through the process of getting their registering to vote, getting all the necessary identifications to be able to do that. And there's so many different ways and times to vote. I don't believe the school should be involved. Our district should be involved in transporting these soon-to-be adults walking out the door of our schools. If they went through all the effort, be able to register to vote, I think they can find a way to vote. There's early voting, there's, mail-in ballots that they can request. I think we shouldn't even be doing this, but that's just me, and I'm willing to come up with some recommendation for the board to consider. Thank you.
All right. Rather than continue the argument, I'm going to adjourn, and we will do as we have said, and we can bring a policy to either be voted for or not. There you go. Okay. Any other matters anyone wants to discuss?
Just say-
Ms.
Yes, ma'am. So, next Thursday, just heads up to the board, we changed the evaluation of the superintendent to be a month after data has come in. And so next Thursday, we'll bring to you guys a self-evaluation and the instrument that Mr. Smith and I have agreed on. There's only a couple of minor changes to language and a couple of indicators. But you'll get self-evaluation next Thursday, have a couple of weeks to fill that out, send it to Mr. Doremus, and then it'll be put on the record in December. So just a reminder, and we'll say this next Thursday, but what you write is public record, and it'll be on the agenda in December.
Everybody gonna see it.
And you're gonna discuss the numbering system and what is kind of anticipated as a group, so we don't embarrass poor Miss Black when she's the lowest grade of anybody? Okay.
It was not the lowest.
Okay.
It was the second lowest.
Gary.
Yeah, I'd like to recognize Ben Connor for his work. Ben received his level 3 boardsmanship and is very close to being the first level 5 master boardsman that Hamilton County has had. So before the year is over, I have a feeling he will have done that.
Thank you. I will be fit. Starting on my portfolio, I'm going to ask you to write a letter of recommendation, sir.
All right. All matters come before the board. We are adjourned.